Since it is 5 o'clock and we have a packed agenda, let's go ahead and get started with Space, Time, and Consciousness 1. I'm very excited for all the speakers that are here today. Stuart Hameroff and I came up with the term astro-consciousness, which you've seen used several times in the conference so far this week. It's a new term paralleling astrobiology, which is a field that I like to research in quite a bit. And it's the idea of studying consciousness in the universe, the origin and evolution of consciousness, and a possible role for consciousness in the origin of life. And there'll be more sessions on that tomorrow. But let's jump in with our first speaker, Nir Lahav from Bar Ilan University in Israel, who is going to be talking to us about the relativistic theory of consciousness. Can physics solve the hard problem?
Exactly. Hi. Let's try it like that. Maybe like that. Hi, so can you all hear me? Excellent. So as he said, my name is Nir Lahav. I'm finished. I finished my PhD in physics in Bar Ilan University in Israel. And today I would like to show you a theory that I developed that try to suggest some kind of a solution for the hard problem of consciousness. And I call it the relativistic theory of consciousness. So as we all know here in this conference, consciousness is one of the biggest mysteries in the universe. How this 1.5 kilo of bloody, messy, gooey flesh create our conscious mind? But first of all, we need to clarify what are we talking about. So I will use consciousness in the canonical definition, let's say, from the 70s of Thomas Nagel, that consciousness is the answer for the question of what is it like? What is it like to see a red? What is it like to be near? For example, this cupboard that you see here most likely has nothing that is like for him to be, just exactly like people under anesthesia. So this will be our definition, and then the hard problem is how to switch from first-person point of view of someone that experienced an apple to the third-person point of view, the scientists that will look at the brain and will see only neural patterns and neural representations of the apple, but not the apple itself. So we need to know how to transform from those neural representations into the actual experience of the apple. And it seems that we cannot find in the brain the experience everywhere, just more and more neural patterns. So how can we do this transformation? There is a gap here between the third-person point of view and the first-person point of view. This is the explanatory gap and the hard problem of consciousness, you can say. What is this function, fx? How can we go from one to the other? And a bit more definitions here. So qualia are those quantities of the conscious experience, and phenomenal consciousness is when we take all of those qualia together. And it seems, as you saw, that they are private. We cannot find them except of the one that actually, except of the subject that observe them. So then, if it's true, if they are private, we encounter the zombie argument. We can think of this creature that is physically identical to me, for example, but with no phenomenal consciousness. And this is because a phenomenal consciousness is so private, it can be independent, or it's independent from the physical world. So we can think of such a weird creature like my twin zombie. So it has no phenomenal consciousness, but the zombie is very interesting, actually. It's not a dull creature. It has a cognitive system exactly as me. So it has representations. So when he will eat an apple, for example, my zombie will say, oh yeah, I eat a red apple and it's so tasty. I don't know what to say about this redness, so I guess I have qualia and I have phenomenal consciousness. So the zombie will think he has phenomenal consciousness, but of course, my zombie is delusional. There's nothing behind the representations. It's a bit like, if you want, you can think about Alexa, and a bit more sophisticated Alexa that will say, oh, I love this song. And you know, there is nothing there. It's just a phrase that Alexa knows how to articulate, but there's nothing behind that. So think about now, so the zombie is the most sophisticated cognitive system that we can think about. So this is more or less the argument. Oh yeah, we call those I see red apple or I love this song, we call those phenomenal judgments. So they have these judgments, but with nothing behind them. Now, if we take all the theories of consciousness, we can put them nicely, I think, in a spectrum. So in one side of this spectrum, we'll have illusionism. Everything, let's say the conscious experience is just an illusion. On the other side, we have another extreme, the naturalistic dualism of Chalmers that say that if consciousness is private, then let's just add this as another element to reality. And all of those theories are a bit extreme and have some paradoxical consequences like zombies, but they do have something in common. Both of them assume that consciousness is absolute. And then it doesn't rely on the observer, and that's why the observer can be delusional, for example, like the zombie, if you like. But then we can do another thing. Let's assume that consciousness is relativistic, and then it's observer dependent. What will happen then? So this is the theory that now I would like to show you. And I hope that I can convince you that it can actually help us solve the hard problem and to understand what is this fx. In order to do that, let's speak about two examples from physics about relativity, and then through them we understand what does it mean to have consciousness as a relativistic phenomena. So let's start with this small video that I have here, and tell me, what do you think? Who the one that moves? Is it the woman inside the train, or maybe the train outside? So as you can see, we actually don't know. We cannot know until the end. Only now in the end we see, oh, actually it was the other train that moves, right? And this is because constant velocity is a relativistic phenomenon in physics, which means that our observer, this woman, she can do whatever physical experiment that she wants, and always she will see that she's at rest. For example, she can throw a ball on the air, and because of inertia, the ball will come back to her hand. So from her point of view, she's at rest. So now we can think about two observers, Alice and Bob. And Alice is on the platform of the train, and Bob is on the train, and it moves right in a constant velocity. So then Bob does experiments and see that he is at rest. So he will say, I'm at rest, you are the one that moves left. But then Alice tell him, no, 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 I'm the one at rest, you are the one that moves to the right. So who is correct here? What is the right answer? And of course, this is the point of relativity. There is no right answer. It depends now. There is no absolute answer. It depends on the observer. So both of them, Alice and Bob, are just two frames of reference, and both of them right. They just describe reality from different point of views. But if they don't know that, velocity is relativistic, then they will continue to argue. Bob will say, well, I'm at rest. And then Alice will say, oh, you know what? You just have a delusion. What do you want from me? And then Bob, in order to do like a counter argument, will say, you know what? I did all my experiments and I see that I'm at rest. So maybe it's just private property that you cannot see. Now, I hope it reminds you something, because this is exactly what we see nowadays with consciousness. Now, of course, both of them are wrong. Velocity is not delusion and not private, just relativistic. So let's see the same thing with consciousness now. Bob will say, I have phenomenal consciousness, but you just have neural patterns. And Alice will say, no, I have phenomenal consciousness, and you have just neural patterns. And then because they think there should be an absolute answer here, they will continue to argue until Alice will say it's just a delusion, and Bob will say it's a private property. So from this small, analog here, we can see how we need to speak about consciousness now as from different cognitive frames of reference, that both frames are correct, and it's just they describe the same underlying reality from different points of view. So to summarize this example, so we see that phenomenal consciousness, if it's relativistic, it means it's depend on the observer, and then it should not be private or delusional. So let's see more now. Let's go even deeper than that. And for that, we need another example of relativity from physics. And this is the Einstein equivalent principle. So think about a different two systems. This system, you see here, we have this spacecraft with the astronaut inside, and this spacecraft is on Earth, and then it's under gravitational field. So when she will release the ball will just fall because of the gravitational field. But then think about another system. Now our spacecraft is in space, and when she will release the ball, it should float near her, right? But if our spacecraft has acceleration upwards, then the floor of the spacecraft will go closer and closer to the floating ball, right? So because there is nothing above and beyond the observer, according to the relativistic principle, what she will observe is that the ball coming closer to the floor, exactly like if it was under gravitational field. So Einstein realized that there is an equivalence here between those two seemingly different systems. There is equivalent between gravitational field and acceleration. And then he did an ingenious thing. He inferred physical laws and phenomena from one system to the other because they are equivalent. So for example, he said, we know that there should be an effect that we call a redshift effect. We know that this is what happened under acceleration to the light. So because of this equivalent, now it should be that the same effect will happen also under gravitational field. And 60 years later, they actually measure it and saw that Einstein was correct. And we have this effect also in gravitational field. So let's do the same thing that Einstein did. What Einstein did here is he used the relativistic principle that says that if I have two observers in two seemingly different systems, but if they measure the same physical results, then it means that actually they are the same. There is equivalence between the two systems, and then they have the same laws of nature, and we can infer those laws and phenomena. So we'll do the same thing, but in order to do it in a more easy way, let's assume for a second that some broad physicalism just mean that there is some kind of physics, some kind of natural laws that explain consciousness. We don't know what it is. It might be something simple like illusionism. It might be something much more elaborate like naturalistic dualism, but there is some kind of physics here. Now, if we assume that, then we can do the equivalent principle of consciousness. So let's start with two systems, right? One system will be Alice, our conscious human. The second cognitive system will be zombie Alice. I call it artificial learning intelligent conscious entity, or in other words, capital letter Alice. So we know about Alice and the zombie Alice that they measure the same results for every physical measurement. So they will measure that they have the same reports, for example, they have the same cognitive system, the same dynamics, the same representations, everything is the same. And then because of that, we can use here the relativistic principle and say the follows. So I have two observers, but they measure the same results, Alice and the zombie Alice. So it means that I have equivalence between the systems, those two cognitive systems. And then it means that I can use the same laws of, they use the same laws of nature, and then I can do what Einstein did, and I can infer the laws from one equivalent system to the other. So because we assume that there is some kind of law of physics that explain consciousness, it means that the same laws that Alice has, also zombie Alice has. So also the zombie Alice now will have consciousness, just because of the relativistic principle. There's nothing above and beyond the observers. So what it means is that according to the relativistic principle, zombies cannot exist, because now our zombies actually have a phenomenal consciousness. But now, because of that, let's examine the zombie. We thought that they didn't have consciousness, and they do have qualia. So what is the qualia in the zombie? So, you know, this is physics. So in the end of the day, we need equations. I did all the, you know, hard work of the equations. I don't have the time to go into it right now, but you can see it in the paper or ask me later. But in the end, one thing that we proved is that qualia is equal to the complex representations of phenomenal judgments. If you remember, we talked about it before, the I see an apple, for example. But this is true only in the frame of reference of the zombie. It's not true everywhere. So again, because there's nothing above and beyond the observer, if the observer has something that is like to be, then this observer has phenomenal consciousness. It is not something, okay, it is not something, he's not delusional about it. But it's true only on his frame of reference. So now everything, there is no absolute truth anymore. Let's say all of our truth are according to the frame of reference that we are in. So let's then see what is the solution then for the question that we started from. We have Bob, and Bob sees an apple, and that's why I experience an apple. And then we have Alice, and Alice is measure only that Bob has only neural representations. So, and we ask, how do we do this transformation? But now we see that we don't need to do this transformation. This is a wrong question. And there is an equivalent here. The third person point of view and the first person point of view are just two different frame of reference that describe the same underlying reality from, and the only different are the measurements that both of them can do. So different measurements create different properties. And this is how we bridge the gap. And you can ask me, okay, so how come we have those two different frame of reference? What is the difference in the measurements between them? The difference is that when we say third person frame of reference, we mean that we measure everything through our sensation subsystem. And our sensation subsystem can measure only the physical substrates. And that's why Alice measures the physical patterns of the neural activity. But a first-person frame of reference is a different measurements. Over there, the cognitive system measure its own representations. So when the cognitive system measures the representation, it doesn't care what is the physical substrate of that. The only measurement here is about the role and the interaction between those representations. And that's why this different measurement create a different property. To this property we call qualia. So this is more or less the idea here that, so it's a physicalist theory, but it's not a reductive materialism, because we don't say here that neural patterns create consciousness. It's the physical measurements, and different measurements create different properties. And also, now we see that phenomenal consciousness is not private. Again, we developed an equation, a transformation that takes us from one cognitive frame of reference to the other cognitive frame of reference. And in order to do that, what we need to do is to change the dynamics of the cognitive system. And this is how we can change, let's say, from one frame of reference to be in the same frame of reference. So now both of them can measure the same qualia. So a prediction here will be that if Alice and Bob could have the same dynamics and share this dynamics, then they can share their own phenomenal consciousness. Now, it sounds like a science fiction, but actually there is something similar to that in reality. Those are Krista and Tatiana Hogan. They are twins that live in Canada, and they share their brain, they share their thalamic bridge. So some representations, they share them, and then they don't measure those representations just as from a third person point of view, but they actually share them as what they are, what their role is. Okay, so to conclude, so phenomenal consciousness is not absolute, it's relative. There is equivalence between Alice and zombie Alice, so zombies cannot exist, and different measurements create different properties, as we just saw. I want to thank Zakaria Neemeh that helped me to write the paper. The paper soon will be published, by the way, in Frontiers of Psychology. It's in press. And the final thing is that I finished my PhD, and I would like to continue and develop this theory. So if you want me to work with you, I'm searching for a postdoc position, or if you know someone that would love it, please let me know. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nir. I'll go ahead and bring the microphone to you. I'll take the chair's prerogative and ask the first question. So what is the coordinate system that the frame of reference is in? Is it space-time, or is there some other dimension or variable that you would need in the different relativistic frames?
Great question. So here we are not in space-time. Only the inputs are, let's say. Now we are in a cognitive system. So our dimensions here is the state space of the cognitive system. So there is some kind of state space that we need to understand what are exactly the axis of that. And all the states, each state there is a different representation. And then we map from those representation in one cognitive frame of reference to the other.
Hi, James Dreesen. In your Einstein train car problem, you skip the part where they each have a laser light gun and shoot it at the same time, and the laser light goes out exactly together. So why did you skip that part of the analogy? Just because it didn't help that your...
So do you mean where, in the equivalent principle that I told you about, or?
No, in physics, the Einstein train problem, he goes through the dropping the ball and the throwing the ball, and that's all right. But if the train's going by and they're two at the same place at the same time and they shine a light, then the light goes out at the exact same speed for both observers.
Yes, you're right. In special relativity and then general relativity, we know that the speed of light should be constant. And now here it's a different thing. I hope I didn't say it in the beginning, but I hope that you see that we are not in relativity theory of Einstein, right? We don't speak here about light, about space and time. We speak here about cognitive frames of reference. So here there is just no analogy yet, at least, to a constant thing like the speed of light. Maybe there will be in the future, but for now I didn't see anything like that.
Well, then I will be quick. In signal theory, you can have a wave, but if you have multiple waves that create an interference pattern, that no wave goes faster than light, but you can create an interference pattern that propagates and begins moving faster than the rest of the wave. And so I think there is something there that nothing's moving faster than light, but yet a propagation interference is moving faster than light. So I think there's something into that, to the physics of that. Look it up, I guess.
Okay, we'll look it up.
I hate to be the one that says, this is my work and this is your work, but you're doing your work, but there is
Okay.
faster than light. And so that could have something to do with your consciousness hard problem.
Okay, I will check it out. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We do have one comment on the Zoom from Neemeh Razale. Thanks. There are not two different measurements, though. We are projecting one point of view to two scenarios, describing imaging the zombie's point of view from Alice's point of view. And you have about 20 seconds to respond to that.
Yeah, no, this is Neemeh. So this is Zakaria. This is so we wrote together the.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Great.
All right. So
we need to go to the next one. If we have time at the end, we'll cycle back. And there's also a poster session right after this. Okay, thank you very much. That was fascinating.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Rulin Zhu from the Hawaii Theoretical Physics Research Center, talking about the holographic principle, string theory, and grand unification theory.
How should I do this? Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, great. How to move? Is it like move like this?
Yes, I think you need to go into slideshow mode.
Okay, how do you with the here? Yeah. So, yes, my name is Rulin Xu, and I want to first introduce myself and how I end up here.
I want to use
okay. So I got my PhD in UC Berkeley in the theoretical physics department, working on the string theory and the grand unification theory. So what is grand unification theory? So grand unification theory is to use one mathematical formula to explain everything. So right now, string theory is the prime candidate for this theory. However, the principle and the symmetry that lead to string theories remains unknown, and the prediction from string theory is limited. So, so I want to share with you, so I got my PhD in UC Berkeley, but afterwards I did my postdoc research in Houston Advanced Research Center and also in Harvard. But then I find myself, I couldn't find a solution. And also I find other physicists, I'm also not happy with their solution either. So I end up actually give up, moved to Hawaii and set up a business, had a good life in Hawaii. And then in Hawaii, I had my spiritual awakening. And actually in one of the ayahuasca journey, I suddenly saw the whole universe is made of love. And the life is about love. So when I start to live like that, my life just become very successful. I think of something, things will happen. And then I was so good at manifest things, and actually I lose the interest manifesting anything. I started actually more putting attention into spiritual growth. And so in Hawaii, I met this world-renowned spiritual healer, Dr. and Master Zhigang Sha. And so I started to learn from him about spiritual healing. And of course, I got a lot of spiritual healing through that. And so in one of his workshops, I had an aha moment. So he talked about heal the soul. And then in one of the workshops, I suddenly realized, so oftentimes I'm thinking about, what is a soul? As a physicist, like, how can I understand the soul from physics point of view? But in one of his workshops, I suddenly saw, wow, I can use quantum physics to mathematically describe and calculate soul. So that insight leads me and him wrote a book called Soul, Mind, and Body Science. And then later, we wrote another book together called Tao Science. So if you want to look into this book. And so in this book, we find actually not only you can actually have the grand unification theory to try to derive all the forces, all the matters, and all the space and time and everything, but physically, but also have a grander unification theory to unify science and spirituality. So right now, my work is I work at the Hawaii Theoretical Physics Research Center and also Tao Academy, train people teaching Tao science, and also train health professionals about this technology we have. And also I set up Tao Center Portland, basically offer people this amazing quantum information field healing. So today this work is, so maybe I'll give you a little bit about how we unify science and spirituality. So one of our discovery is actually, so in the ancient wisdom, it's called the law of Shen Qi Jing. It basically said everything is made of three things. Jing is matter, Qi is energy, and Shen in Chinese means miraculous. But what is a miraculous thing? So what do we discover in my research? This miraculous thing is basically the information. So we discovered this law is basically everything's made of three things. One is matter. Matter is what we see, what we hear, we touch, everything we observe, we experience. And then energy. Energy is what moves and changes the matter. So everything has these three elements. And third element is the information. Information is what gives the form and shape to energy and matter. So information is a key that determines energy and matter. And so from this point of view, if we want to, current Western medicine is basically on the matter level, they heal the body, and then the energetic healing is working on the energetic level. But we are healing on the information, Shen level, miraculous level. But this is also, all of this can be mathematically studied and scientifically studied. So, and also in our Tao science, we give, we find this information has three aspects. One is the content of the information, the data, the memory of the computer. So we find that the content of information is a spirit or soul. So that is why the information determines the matter and the energy. That is why the spirit determines energy and matter. So even, everybody quantum physics, we're a vibrational field. When we die, even our body stops functioning, but our spirit, the information is still there. Our vibration is still, a lot of it's there. And so that is why spirit is the essence of life, determines every aspect of our life. And also even our physical body stop functioning, the soul and spirit still keep going. Yeah, so from this definition, we can study the spirit mathematically, scientifically. And also we find the receiver of the information. So information contains three aspects, right? Content information is receiver information, processor of information. Receiver of the information, if we find in a spiritual heart. Like if you read a spiritual book in the Bible was said, guard your heart because everything's coming from it. And if you read Buddha's book, Buddha says everything is from the heart. All the phenomena is coming from the heart. So what is that heart? So we call that heart spiritual heart. And that heart we find is a receiver of the information. So when you can receive the information and then the manifestation starts, that is why the spiritual heart determines every aspect of our life. Yeah, and so processor information we define as mind or consciousness. So through this definition, we can study the spirit, study the spiritual heart and the mind scientifically, mathematically, and also develop very advanced healing system based on this understanding. And also in Tao science, we find you can define the positive information and negative information. And also we find that, so if positive information is a connection and order in our field, so that's positive information. And the negative information is a disconnection, disorder in our field. So the soul sickness is basically excess of negative information. And so soul sickness is the root cause of all sickness, all challenge, and all difficulties in our life. In fact, the purpose of our life, the physical life, is to enhance our soul, because soul is internal. Our physical life is so small, and our physical life is trying to enhance our soul and to accumulate to accumulate the positive information in our field, to advance our soul to a higher level, have more connection. This is very profound. I'm just going to, so that you know where I'm come from. So, so this is a quantum information field healing technology we are using. Is so in our center, I give people healing, save so many people's lives, just miraculously save people's lives. Like people have cancer come to me in 1 hour, 2 days later they tested that they have no cancer. So it's really amazing. Yeah, our center runs very, extremely well. So many people come to us, and we save many people's lives. So how we do that? So first we change people's vibrational field, and second we remove the negative information from their field, and then we input the positive information, and also we teach them how to reprogram their spiritual heart, because what you need to receive positive information, and also use your mind to process information in a positive way rather than negative way, to enhance the positive information. So this way you can, people's life completely changed in every aspect of life. So we have clients that come to me for the successful business or have good relationships, for cancer, for COVID, and all of this work for everything, every aspect of our life. So today I'm going to talk about the holographic principles, and string theory, and grand unification theory. So this is a recent paper I recently wrote. So it's very it's very theoretical physics. So but I will share so that you get a taste about my research. This is also very important research that's very dear to my heart. So recently so I'm going to share with you what is a holographic principle. So holographic principle was first proposed by Taheri, who is a Nobel laureate in theoretical physics. He noticed that combination of quantum physics and gravity requires that the three-dimensional world we observe is actually a projection from a 2D hologram. So he basically noticed this fact, and then later Quam and Medicina, and he basically demonstrated how that could happen specifically through some of the models. And then so this also the Raf from the professor in Berkeley, and he proposed that this holographic principle could be the principle that leads to discovery of the grand unification theory, because this principle seems sit at the cross-section of seemingly several independent physics theories like gravity, string theory, thermodynamics, geometry of space-time, quantum physics, and information theories. Like all these different disciplines was included in this holographic principle. So he thinks this in a holographic principle could be the fundamental principle that can derive everything. But he don't know how to do it. Part of the thing is, if you want to, because holographic principle basically indicates that the information could be play the critical role in the final finding of the unified theory. But also this kind of idea actually also first suggested by John Wheeler. He basically suggested it from bit. It is like everything we experience in life. And so everything, including the whole universe or everything coming from the bit is the information. So he proposed this idea, but he also, it's just an idea and they don't know how to really implement such idea. So also I'm just going to share with you basically, our how we can implement it. So to implement holographic principle as fundamental principle, first you need to find out what is that elementary information. So if there's it, right, you need to have an elementary information that creates everything. But what is that elementary information? Normally we say, oh, there's an elementary particle, but in this principle, it should be there's elementary information from which everything is created. So what is that? So in our work, we suggested there exists this elementary information, which is a pure universal basic information. We propose this as the elementary essential elements underlying and creating all physical phenomena. So this is our suggestion proposal. So what is this elementary information then? So we propose that two-dimensional space-time itself encodes the elementary information. So two-dimensional space and time itself encodes the elementary information. And then, so we can derive the minimum space and time, this two-dimensional space-time to encode one piece of elementary information. And then from there, we can derive the holographic action. And then from holographic action, so we basically derived everything. So, so this is in our paper, we can derive what is the minimum space and time to encode one bit of elementary particle, elementary information. So basically, in quantum physics teaches us if it takes energy and a momentum to measure space and time, right? So to measure space and time with duration of Dr. Tau, it takes the energy of h bar over Dr. Tau. And also in general relativity, so if you have energy,
5 minutes.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so in general relativity basically shows us that so if you have energy, you can curve the space and time. And then this curved space time so that there's a black hole horizon. It can lead to a black hole horizon. So if you take into this account, you really find that there's a minimum space and time that can encode one piece of space and time. So from this, we derived this elementary information action, holographic information action, I would say. And so we derived this holographic information action, and then we discovered that this holographic information action is basically gives a new derivation of string action. So basically from a holographic action I can derive string theory. Not only I derive string theory, I can derive the quantum physics and also general relativity. And also I can show that an elementary particle emerged from this action due to the Pachankis symmetry. And also I can show the gravity, electric, magnetic, weak, and strong action emerged from this action due to diffeomorphic symmetry. And also I can calculate black hole entropy and study what is inside black hole, which is a big problem right now in theoretical physics, people don't know how to study what's the inside black hole, but this actually can study it. It's really cool. And also, it's also this action actually predict dark matter and dark energy and can solve why the cosmology constant is so small. And actually, we can calculate cosmology constant, the dark matter, dark energy, and be consistent with current observation. And also we find that, and this also provides a way for us to study how, at high energy, the space can be in higher dimensions, but when it comes to down, and the space-time start to compactify. And then we start to live in a 4 dimension, and how that dynamic happens, which other theory no way can study. But this actually can really study it. It's really cool. And then we can also study, the hierarchy between the electric scale and the Planck scale, and which is a big problem right now in physics, and which is really amazing because nobody can derive this, and from our thing we can derive. And also, so all of this compactivation of space and time, and also the hierarchy is actually due to this emergence of quantum entanglement. And I think the emergence of time, life is basically, actually in our research, I published one paper about mathematical definition of life. And I'm basically saying life is a system that can maintain and also develop and enhance the positive information. And so this action can also gives us the dynamics, how the positive information can develop in a system. So I believe in the future, I can really using this action to study the emergence of life. So this is basically our my recent paper. So I have another way to derive this holographic action. There's another paper I published maybe 5 years ago. So basically, I show that space and time are two fundamental consciousness.
A minute.
Consciousness. And so space is a consciousness of something is being still, and time is a consciousness of something is changing. And then these two consciousness, they interact and create everything. And so from this kind of law of creation, I can derive the Lagrangian superstring, and also derive everything from that. So it's kind of similar to this holographic derivation, but look at things a different way. So in this way, basically shows that space and time is our consciousness, and this consciousness actually creates everything we observe, including fundamental particles, the whole universe, dark matter, dark energy, all the fundamental forces. And so the conclusion is our consciousness of space and time creates a space-time hologram, and everything emerged from that. That's me.
Questions? Go right here.
We saw quite different language to a certain extent between your talk and the previous talk. And I think you started with using the word spirituality. And of course, that's one of the challenges, how science and spirituality can somehow combine. What I'd like to do is just reduce it to one question, which is, can the spiritual heart, the receiver of information, can that be something that a zombie or a robot is capable of having as a conscious, for example, I'm even confused if a zombie can have consciousness, but if it all boils down to perspective, would you say that it's possible for a robot to have a spiritual heart?
Yeah, actually, from this theory, everything has consciousness. It's just the consciousness, what level, the stone, their consciousness, because as long as you can receive information and exhibit information, then you have some kind of consciousness. But it's just at what level. Of course, zombie has a consciousness, but the humans have lots bigger consciousness. And also, if you do spiritual development, your consciousness will be even go higher.
I just wanted to ask, are you familiar with constructor theory?
What?
Constructor theory?
Not too much. No.
It resonates really strongly with centering information as like the fundamental aspect of the universe. It's Chiara Marletto at Oxford University. The science of can and can't is what it's also referred to as. So yeah, maybe look at it and you can get some inspiration there as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your talk. I appreciate your research. My question is really about what sort of feedback are you getting from your peers with regard to your research? Like when you're making some very wonderful claims and
Yeah.
It's
So
very
that's,
exciting.
I'm kind of getting ready to present to the theoretical physicists. Yeah, I'm still preparing because I left that field for more than 20 years. So there's now they create all kind of new math, which I need to right now learn and then put my stuff into that new math framework. Yeah, but I think we definitely have something there because I have been working on that before. I was in such a despair. I just don't see any hope. But now I feel like I got everything I need to get. Yeah, I just need to learn a little bit more fancy math at this moment.
Online, we just had one comment from Dr. D.S. Kathari. Excellent. I have also proposed a holographic model on basis of ancient Jainism and see the poster paper at this conference. So that's just maybe somebody you want to follow up with at the poster session right after that.
Okay.
And I would also note from my perspective, when I teach astrobiology, I teach that the universe is matter, energy, and information. So that really resonated with me. Question then, how would we detect life? This is one of the big questions we ask in astrobiology. Extraterrestrial life, maybe not based on the same chemistry that's based here.
Exactly.
So any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I'm so glad you're here. Yeah, I was thinking about that actually, because based on this theory, life can be in all kind of forms. It does not have to have flash like we have, their life in extreme condition we cannot even dream about, but they can still have life. So as long as they have some organization, they can develop the positive information, and maintain it, and then that is life. So yeah, so definitely, I think we should look at in that direction. Yeah, we can talk more about that.
Wonderful. And we do have time for one more question.
Hi, you mentioned your you mentioned your research several times, but I'm curious what the methodology might look like. And I ask this question because a friend of mine died from getting alternative treatments for cancer. So I'd really like to hear what your methodology was.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So basically, we use some so a special technique to help people change their field, because fundamentally we're a field. We need to change the field, and then second, we have technology to remove the negative information. And then third is to, so after that, then I need to do some, like for example, give example. So one of this girl, she had breast cancer. She come to me. So she was.
We're running out of time. So
okay, yeah, maybe we talk afterwards.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you so much, everyone. Appreciate it.
Okay, let's move on to our next speaker. Is Farzad Ahmadkhaniou from Cosmotel Incorporated and also graduate advisor at the University of California in Irvine. And he's going to be talking to us about consciousness cosmology. And as a reminder, please try to use the microphone. When I was in the back, it was a little hard to hear the speaker, and we do also have people online.
Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to present T-Consciousness Cosmology, a theory by Muhammad Ali Taheri, who is the founder of Cosmo-Intel Research Center for T-Consciousness Fields Studies. I'm going to talk about the story of universe and then motivation of this presentation, a brief overview of Big Bang Theory. You all know what Big Bang Theory is. Then T-Consciousness Cosmology, the differences between Big Shock that comes from T-Consciousness Cosmology and the Big Bang, and at the end, the theory of everything. So cosmology is where science, philosophy, theology, and religion meet. Each discipline has its own description for cosmology. In some aspects, they agree. In some aspects, they completely disagree. Considering cross-disciplinary ideas, when you are thinking about new theories, it's going to provide some broader perspective when you are considering different disciplines or philosophy. As an example, the Big Bang was originated, the idea of Big Bang was originated by a priest and a scientist. So seeing the big picture is going to provide big ideas. When we have different people from different disciplines, we may find some solutions to some of the mysteries of the universe that currently we don't have any answer. What is the goal of this presentation? To rethink and reevaluate our theories. You all know about the Big Bang Theory. This is one of the dominant cosmological models that we have. Although most of the scientists, cosmologists, they agree on Big Bang Theory, there are so many unanswered questions. And there are some main issues with the Big Bang. The flatness problem, the horizon problem, and the magnetic monopole problem. These are some of the main problems with the Big Bang Theory. There are some add-on theories to the Big Bang. They provide some answers and solutions to some of these issues. However, they create other questions and other problems. Here are some of the examples of unanswered questions. What happened before the Big Bang? What caused the Big Bang? Where did the initial matter and radiation come from? What happened in Planck era? What was the mechanism for galactic formation? What are dark matter and dark energy? Where are they? Why we are living in a fine-tuned universe? There are so many constants. How come all of these constants are what we have, this fine-tuned universe? How come? The problem with the time and entropy, which I will explain later. Sometimes we have contradiction between some of the theories. For example, general relativity and quantum field theory, when we go inside the black holes, they contradict each other. And so many other questions that we cannot answer with Big Bang and other theories. When we ask these questions from astrophysicists and cosmologists, here are some of the example responses we receive. We don't know. It was just an accident. Big Bang Theory is not about the first few pages of the book. We don't know what are the first few pages of the book. We are reading after the first few pages of the book. However, when we ask them, okay, what's at the end of the book you are reading? They say, we don't know. They don't know the beginning of the book. They don't know the end of the book. And then they talk about the parallel universe, multiverse, and so many other responses that doesn't make sense. Let's look at the universe from another point of view. T-consciousness cosmology. So this theory, T-consciousness cosmology, was developed by Muhammad Ali Taheri in the 1980s. What is T-consciousness? So from the two presenters before me, we heard about different levels of consciousness. We heard about the observer point of view, that the reference point of view, observer point of view. When we talk about T-consciousness, it's the highest level of consciousness we are talking about. It's the fundamental consciousness. It's neither matter nor energy. It's not originated by human being. That's why we call it T-consciousness, to differentiate it from other levels of consciousness. So from T-consciousness point of view, here is the story of the universe. The universe started as a cosmic black hole. It is a different black hole that we know. It is a cosmic black hole with unique features. In this cosmic black hole, there are absolute materials which are known to science at this point. So how we got this universe from this cosmic black hole with absolute matter that we call it TAM? If I want to explain that, first I want to talk about an analogy. A spring. When you compress the spring, then it has its maximum stress. When you release it, then the stress is released. The beginning point of the cosmos, that cosmic black hole, is analogous to the initial state of the stressed spring. Then, based on the cosmic rebound, analogous to what happens to a spring, it goes to the final state, which is the relaxed state. So it started, the beginning point of the cosmos, it started with a cosmic black hole. Then, based on the process that we call it big shock, I will explain it later, the rebound started. Right now, we are in the rebound stage of the universe. It gets to a point that is the terminal edge of the cosmos. We call it absolute darkness. At that point, there will be no matter or energy. It will be consciousness, which I will explain. Then it will reverse back to the next cosmic black hole. We are 13.8 billion years from the last cosmic black hole, and we don't know when we are going to get to the next cosmic black hole. This absolute matter, TAM, that was the initiation of the universe and the cosmos. When the rebound started, because of the disintegration of TAM, we have this whole universe as a ball expanding. However, again, from T consciousness point of view, we have a shell which consists of the TAM material. This TAM has dark matter. This dark matter is disintegrated in different phases of dark matter. And at the end, we have dark energy. So the science is aware of dark energy. That release of space mesh is going to come from the dark energy. As the universe rebounds and expands, we have the release of space mesh. Then from light dark matter, we have different stages of waves from super compressed to non-compressed. And then we have the fundamental energy and particles and antiparticles. At the end, we have the nuclei of early atoms like hydrogen and helium. And based on that, this is the way the universe is expanding. Again, it started as a cosmic black hole in the past 13.8 billion years. It is going to the terminal edge of the cosmos, similar to the complete release of a spring. Outside this, motion is not defined. Space is not defined. Gravity, time, entropy, they are not defined. Inside, all of these are defined. And right now, we are somewhere in the middle. So the base of this universe is motion. That is the base of this universe. That is why we have this cosmos. We have independent variables, space and waves. From these independent variables, we get dependent variables, which are gravity and time. From T consciousness point of view, gravity and time are vectors. And the relationship between the time, as we know, to the time based on T consciousness is the reciprocal of the norm of the time based on T consciousness. So let me talk about a couple of other definitions. The temperature. At this point, the scientists believe the temperature in the cosmos is 2.7 Kelvin. From T consciousness point of view, that 2.7 Kelvin depends on the location from the cosmic shell. So as the universe is expanding, that cosmic shell is actually going to the rebound process. And depending on the distance from the cosmic shell, the temperature is changing. That is one factor. Depending on the distance from the cosmic shell, the temperature is changing. The other factor is the expansion of the universe itself. As the universe is expanding, that 2.7 Kelvin is decreasing. So as the universe is expanding, the temperature that we are going to measure for the universe is going to go down to absolute zero. And that is when we have no matter, no energy. When we have light passing through different materials, different transparent materials, the wavelength and the speed of light changes. This is the way, this is the same way as the cosmos is expanding. So as the cosmos is expanding, because the viscosity of the cosmos is changing, the wavelength is changing, the speed of the waves are changing, the frequency is changing, the temperature is changing. So all of these are changing as the universe is expanding. So all the constants that we think are constants, they are not constants. They are variables. The entropy, temperature, viscosity, and gravitational constant. We are at a point that we are measuring these constants and we think they're constant, but they are changing as the cosmos is expanding. So let me compare very quickly the Big Shock versus the Big Bang. So for Big Bang, the initial condition at time is equal to 0 is unknown. In Big Shock, it is known. We know the initial conditions. In Big Bang, there is no explosion. In Big Shock, there were 2 explosions to that black hole. It's interesting that there is no hard evidence before 10 to the minus 13, and still the scientists say there is no explosion. How do you know there was no explosion when you say we don't know what happened before 10 to the minus 13? That is a big question. The other thing is, based on Big Bang, the scientists believe there were low entropy and low disorder, and as cosmos is expanding, the entropy is increasing. However, the big question is, how with that low entropy, the Big Bang happened and the inflation happened afterwards? However, in Big Shock, we had the maximum entropy at the beginning, and now it is going back to low entropy. It is similar to a spring that is going back to the unstressed status. In Big Bang, we have expansion due to dark matter. That's the same case in Big Shock. However, the disintegration of the TAM for the cosmic shell, that is causing another level of expansion that is acting similar to solid fuel in a rocket. In Big Bang, the scientists believe inflation happened in a very tiny fraction of time. The universe expanded from the size of nucleus to grapefruit. However, there is no expansion based on Big Shock because first, the cosmic shell, the TAM, does not let the universe to expand and did not let that. The other thing is we had maximum gravity at that point. How come with that maximum gravity, inflation can happen? The fabric of universe based on Big Bang is space and time, and we get gravity out of that. Based on Big Shock, the motion is the base of this universe. We have independent variables, space and waves, and dependent variables are gravity and time. Based on Big Bang, there is no boundary and edge to the universe. Based on Big Shock, we have the cosmic shell. That is a huge difference between these two theories. My background is in engineering. Let me give you an example. When you do finite element analysis and computational fluid dynamics, when you don't know the initial conditions and you don't know the boundary conditions, your simulation results are not going to make any sense. That is what happened with the simulation that has been done to the cosmology. The initial condition is not known. The boundary condition is not known. However, the initial condition and boundary conditions are known in Big Shock. The CMB based on Big Bang happened 380,000 years after the Big Bang. In Big Shock, this is continuously happening. The temperature difference, 2.7 everywhere. However, it is not constant in the cosmos based on Big Shock. The constants are constant based on Big Bang. Based on Big Shock, they are not constant. We receive new images from Hubble. There are some questions why we have these images from early universe. We have the answers in Big Shock. The James Webb Space Telescope, what they are going to see, they think they are going to see 380 years, 380,000 years after the Big Bang. However, based on the Big Shock, we are looking at 13.8 billion years after the Big Bang with the delay that is coming back to us. So before the Big Shock, before the Big Bang, based on Big Bang, we don't know what happened. Based on Big Shock, we know the answer. The moment of the Big Bang is not known. The moment of Big Shock is known. The initial and boundary conditions in Big Bang are not known. In Big Shock, they are known. The prediction of the future based on Big Bang is unknown. For Big Shock, it is known. The fine-tuned universe, there is no answer for that for Big Shock. For Big Bang, we have the answer. And why this universe exists, there is no answer for Big Bang. We have the answer in Big Shock. In Big Bang, the first few pages of the book is unknown. The last chapter is unknown. How we got that book here is unknown. Why we are reading this book is unknown. In Big Shock, we have the answer to all of those questions. And I'm going to finish very, very shortly. Based on Big Bang, we have matter, energy, dark matter, and dark energy. Based on Big Shock, of course, we have matter, energy, dark matter, and dark energy. However, we have one element, the highest level of consciousness, T consciousness. Based on Big Bang, we have conservation of matter and energy. Based on Big Shock, we have the conservation of information. That is the difference. So from the previous cosmic black hole to the next cosmic black hole, it is the information that is going to get transferred. And there's going to be a difference. The difference is we as human beings are adding to that information before it gets to the next cosmic black hole. So T consciousness, the main element of the universe, and we can see the T consciousness everywhere. Today I talked about the larger scale. On Friday, my colleague is going to talk about the smaller scale. So please make sure to please join that session and as well on Friday. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. We have time for a couple quick questions.
How does your model account for the accelerated rate of expansion? And also, how would it account for Hawking points if they're confirmed in the CMB?
So for the acceleration, there are two reasons for the acceleration. Let me bring the slide here. So there are two reasons for the acceleration. First, the thickness of the cosmic shell, it is decreasing. That TAM material is converted to dark matter, dark energy, and the matter and energy. So the thickness is decreasing. As the thickness is decreasing, the expansion accelerates. So we have that Hubble constant H0. We have that here in this model as well. The other reason is the disintegration of the TAM, the material of that shell that helps that acceleration. So because of two reasons, we have that acceleration and we have that H0 for Hubble constant here. You may be wondering about the thickness of that shell. So at the beginning, what was the thickness of all of those based on Big Bang? The radiation and matter, what was the thickness of that? It's singularity, it goes to zero. So that thickness is the same story, it goes to zero. However, it decreases. It is not absolute zero. It goes to zero and it is decreasing. Don't think about that as the thickness of watermelon or something like that.
Okay, I just have a question about the time element. If the Big Bang or the Big Shock was the beginning of time, and if we're not talking about a series one after the other of Big Bangs or Big Shocks, how could nothingness create this something of the Big Bang? I'm not sure, you might have answered, but I didn't catch, because if we're assuming there was no predetermined or pre-existing elements to cause the Big Bang, then we have, it seems to me, a nothingness, and it's out of time. Now, how does something that's nothing become something?
It is the T consciousness. So T consciousness is neither matter nor energy, and it caused that explosion in the TAM to initiate the first or the nth universe.
All right, thank
So,
you.
so it's based on the T consciousness.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you very much.
And I will note there is a comment at the time for the presentations and that there is a link to the YouTube video. So you have more explanations online.
Sure.
Right. Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next presenter is Beverley Zabriskie from the Jungian Psychoanalytic Association. And she will be telling us about the neuroscience of C.G. Jung, the depth of psychology of neuroscientists.
Well, if you are wondering what I am doing here, you're in a merged state with me.
Please use the microphone.
I am not quite sure what I'm doing here, but the purported reason was that I was meant to give a kind of living example of certain dimensions of the brain and how it worked very specifically in relation to emotion, and what it's like to be with persons who are going through deep intellectual, emotional, probing, empirical experience with their own lives and psyches. So if that's a little too different from what the text of this talk is, you are free to leave, but I hope you'll stay. What I'm going to try to do is give you some sense, first of all, of how a Jungian analyst did end up here and what the history is behind this, which is quite, it's sort of extraordinary. Jung was born in 1875 under the Austro-Prussian Empire, and he died in 1961, just before Kennedy went into the White House. That's his time period. Freud was born 1850. They were 25 years apart. Freud, in Julian Jaynes' book, The Bicameral Mind, he describes how metaphors are used that describe the energy systems available at the time. So Freud's model was a very hydraulic model, sort of based on trains being on tracks, etc. And Jung's model was very much more in the realm of relativity and also quantum theory, and not by accident. Could somebody give me some water? Thank you. So Jung taught at after being a psychiatrist in an inpatient unit for 7 years, he taught at the Polytechnic Institute in Zurich, the so-called ETH. And a person on the faculty was Einstein. So the two of them were teaching in this school at the same time. Thank you, Amy. Try. Jung, by that time, was quite established, and Einstein was quite impoverished. So he invited him over for dinners. And in 1911, he wrote to Freud, with whom he'd been working, but feeling very uncomfortable about the idea that all psychic energy was sexual. and that any other kind of energy was simply a sublimation of sexual energy. Jung wrote to Freud and said, I've been having this physicist who's working on the theory of light. He came over with Bloiler, who was the psychiatrist who invented the idea of schizophrenia, the diagnosis of schizophrenia. And it was fascinating, but whenever he talked about mathematics, I felt like falling 14 feet under the floor. But he then went on to say in a later letter, I was so impressed with him that when Wolfgang Pauli, the Nobel scientist, approached me to go and do analysis, I did not take him as a patient. I referred him out to someone, but he sent me 400 of his dreams out of 1,300 that Wolfgang Pauli had recorded. So Jung was very much in touch with the whole thinking of Einstein as far as he could understand it. They stayed in touch through the years. There's also some notion that Jung, of course, he could never say it, but it has been said that he gave therapy to Einstein's son when he really was quite disturbed. And then Jung also, through them and through their conversations, got to know Niels Bohr and what his approach to science was. And through the rest of his life, he had a Niels Bohr complex. That he said Niels Bohr could say something like something existed like a neutrino and nobody would doubt him. But Jung couldn't say, who knows if there's a God, but I do know that human beings carry God images and then I get attacked. So he was very much in his way a scientist. He developed the word association experiment, which was a psychogalvanic, almost like the precursor to the lie detector test, and showed by the delayed reactions in the body how complexes entered in when a certain association was given or was asked. And he also had a great love of number. He said he couldn't understand math, but he saw number as the archetype of order. That was how he described it. And I could never quite understand it. He said if he had come back for another life, he would study primary numbers. And he thought he could have an access to the universe through that. So he handed them over to an assistant of his and said, here, this is what you have to work on, number. It's only since the realization of algorithms as having such control on our brains that I understood why he was so interested in number back then. He went on to be very interested in the proto-psychology, proto-chemistry, proto-physics, and the serious alchemical experimental endeavors. And he saw them and they were approached as almost like living Rorschach tests, that the alchemists would put certain substance into a retort and they would watch to see what happened between the copper and the mercury and the lead while they were, of course, poisoning themselves by doing so. And try to internalize that as what might be going on in their psyches and in their emotions, especially, and how the different parts of themselves were coupling and how they might couple with others. So this motif was very central to Jung's idea that repression was not the mode of survival, but dissociation was. So the whole model is one of great dissociation, sort of going around, picking up the parts of oneself that has been dissociated, integrating them into oneself and trying to get opposites in tension and together. That was sort of the basic Jungian approach. I'm going to read now a few quotes from Jung and say a little bit about how these sorts of ideas come up in the therapy. My own practice is in New York. I'm in Manhattan. Probably I have about 30, 35 patients. It's face-to-face, and there's a great deal going on all the time in bodily transmission, near neuron transmission, both auditory and visual. And it's very much a field phenomenon. When you're in a room and you are submitting to the other person's psyche and using the leverage they give you to be part of their process, you really are entering into another energy field. And in one way I know this is that with some patients, I am so brilliant, I can hardly stand myself. And with others, I feel so stupid, so dense, so superficial that I wonder why in heaven's name, why did they come to, what did they want? Why did they come to see me? So that sort of thing happens all the time. One of the great combinations that resulted from Jung's interest in the science is that he and Pauli developed together the whole idea of synchronicity. And if you would like to read a really stunningly beautiful correspondence between a younger man, Pauli was born in 1900, died in 1958, and an older man really struggling to get their ideas across to each other. It's in a volume put out by Princeton University Press called Adam and Archetype, and I wrote the preface to that. Why I was asked to write the preface to that is still beyond me, but it took me 2 years of learning about physics, not learning physics, learning about physics to write it. And I had a couple of my physicist friends vet it for me. But in his time, Jung opined that 100 years forward, he wrote this in 1957, our field would look back and wonder if we had the slightest notion of what we were saying and doing. Now today, the brain scientist Eric Kandel declares it will be another 100 years before we understand the workings of the brain. Others find this overly optimistic. My question today is, what might psyche and neuroscience make of each other, and what do they offer each other? It may, I put this down. So in this kind of practice, we pay attention to all sorts of products of the mind, including the mythologies, the fairy tales, the legends. And so, for instance, I could just offer you, based on the talk we just heard, the major Egyptian creation myths. In terms of the Big Bang, there was one theory that the God was lonely, and out of his loneliness, he took himself in his hand and he masturbated, and the world came into being. And so he could renew himself through the years. Anyone was buried with extra little hands in case tomb thieves came, so you could keep renewing yourself through eternity. In terms of the big shock, there's another myth. I had no intention of talking about this. I'm responding to you. There was another that the God, on the first day, he laughed. On the second day, he cried. Gods came into being, the world came into being. On the third day, he laughed, and in the middle of his laugh, he broke into a sob. And so it was in the crack between his laughter and joy and enjoyment that human beings were developed. So there you get the Big Bang and the big shock in this beautiful mythopoeic mode of expression, but the understanding of the dynamic was there. I've once written an article called Imagination is Laboratory, and I go through what some of the modern techniques are and go back to the imaginations that sort of initiated them. So like mythologies in any other symbol system, the neurosciences do not always deal with whole facts, but they do express partial truths, be they later proven or transitional and fleeting until the next fMRI or PET scan reveal another reality. Exposure to neuroscience has not changed how I engage with my patients, but it makes me more aware of why I'm doing or saying what emerges in the explicating field of analysis. It offers language, analogies, patterns to invoke as one source or perspective of understanding, to evoke with patients who seek a language for grounding, as do I, or need perturbation in their sense of self, as do I. Like dreams, neuroscience offers image and language for the elusive operative qualities either missing or at play in the emotional time space of charged bonds or aversions within, between, and among us. They may provide a bottom-up phenomenal approach to mental dynamics, but unlike our probings of our subjective experience, they do not bring a fuller sense of self. That's not the purpose, the fuller sense of self in neuroscience. It's the understanding of the brain. But it does offer entry into our brains and assist in the consulting room. Now, I can just give you one example of how that might be. If one is with someone and they're high emotional arousal, as they're expressing something that, say, has just happened in their lives, or, and this has to do with psychic time, which is not the same as chronological time, a memory has just emerged. And in the expression of that, they're in such high emotional arousal, they cannot hear what they are saying or even register what they're saying. So
5 minutes.
Wow, that was fast. Fast from the origin of the world to now. So I'm very aware then that what's happening, and this is through McGilchrist's Master and His Emissary, which is a marvelous book about right hemisphere, left hemisphere. I'm aware that in order to survive that moment, the corpus callosum is going to shut down and the person is not going to be able to think or reflect on what they just said. So then I echo. And when they hear the echo and my putting it into words, that's when the person can take it back in a kind of feedback loop. I'm obviously with 5 minutes, I'm going to have to go very quickly. I would like to just mention to you the neuroscientists that I think make the most sense and who continue to do this wonderful work. Some of them you probably know very well. Gerald Edelman is a great favorite, and he gives the description of consciousness as the remembered present. And if you hear that carefully, you hear that there's been a dismemberment, there's a rememberment, there's a reflection, so that one is simultaneously having the experience and reflecting on it. So that's one of my favorite definitions of consciousness, as the remembered present. Another neuroscientist is Rodolfo Linas. I urge you to read him. He's a Colombian. He's from Bogota. He was the chief of neurobiology and neuropsychiatry at NYU. He was so precise, he examined the inside of brain cells and found that every brain cell had a different agenda. And we wonder why we're ambivalent about things. But also he was a close friend of Marquez. And so his way of approaching the psyche, mind, brain has that kind of quality as well. Another one is Myron Hofer, who is part of the eco-dev movement, which is one of the more cutting edge schools of therapy and thought. And Joseph Ledoux, who's perhaps my favorite, he has a center of research at NYU also. And his last book is The 400 Billion Old Brain, The Deep History of Ourselves. And he goes back and shows, he researches all the different forms of life from microbes on, and shows how they are still registers of knowing in our beings. Now, that was tremendously helpful to me, because in dream interpretation, what we try to do is be as specific as we possibly can about the different elements in the dream. And so that's another example of how there's a kind of fertile connection between what one can learn from neuroscience and what could be present in the psychoanalytic process. Another is Paul Ekman, who did the facial expression studies, where he shows that across cultures, we can recognize the emotion from facial expressions of persons from other cultures. What we just have to remember is that the emotion may not have the same valence in that culture as it has in ours. And he talks about the basic survival emotions as anger, disgust, fear, joy, sorrow, and surprise. And so the surprise leaves also one open to being curious and registering anomalous experiences. I'm going to end by just mentioning that last summer, and this has to do with Chalmers' talk on Friday. Last summer, I read a book called The Anomaly. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's about simulations, and that's a new kind of language that we're beginning to use in the therapeutic models. The degree to which we're all somewhat simulations of ourselves in terms of the various fields that we're in, and that can be without having to do it through, a video game or whatever that realm is. And The Anomaly is about a plane coming from Paris to New York that disappears, and then it lands many months later in New Jersey. And then you find out that what you think is the second plane has all the simulations of the passengers on the first plane and how they relate to each other. The ones that like each other, the ones that actually kill each other. And it's take it metaphorically as a psychological sort of description. And if you haven't read the Chalmers book yet, you'll see that he talks a great deal about that. One little factoid about, let's say, I would say 8 years ago, the canton of Zurich and the Swiss government approached us to work with them on a conference about what Zurich had brought to New York. And what they wanted to have us talk about, the Jungians, was Jung's effect on video games. I thought, oh my God, this is the end. We're going to get shut down. Turns out the major inspirers and creators of video games were very much affected by Jung's Red Book. Someone showed a mandala. Oh, it was Carhart today, showed a mandala. It looked as if it was out of the Red Book. He talked about archetypes. He talked about psyche. I was in a little bit of a shock about that. But that with Jung's psychological types and theories of archetypes, that's how the creators of the video games were creating their characters. So I just want to throw that out just in case you think we're so antiquated that we're completely retro. You're engaging in Jungian thought when you're playing a video game. I'll end.
Questions for Beverley? I'll ask one. So you talked about the microbes and as repositories of information and connected it to your psychology. I'm always fascinated by the statistic. The human body has 100 trillion cells, 90 trillion are bacteria, and 10 trillion are you. Do you see any relevance to that composition? So you're 90% single-celled bacteria and 10%.
That tells you how much is going on inside of you. You had no idea of.
Right.
You know, the body is the great mystery.
Right.
It's the inner space that matches the outer space. Yeah.
Question?
You mentioned synchronicity. And can you give us a little quick short summary of the latest thinking with regard to meaningful coincidences?
Sure. And I can also put in a little plug. We're having a conference, all-day conference on May 1st on synchronicity. It's a teleconference. Harold Ottmansbacher will speak, Dean Rickles will speak, I'll speak, one other person will speak.
Okay.
But the idea is, and I had a lot of quotes from Edelman about this, that mind is a special arrangement of matter. And because of that, it's almost a sort of more particular anthropic principle that we're somehow made up of the variety of random gases that some people think are a very unfortunate collision of random gases, and that we can have a thought and an expectation, and then it enters into our realm of surprise. And surprise is a survival emotion. So because from an analytic perspective, you're always looking at the why. What is the purposiveness of that? What I have seen is the people who have a synchronicity are reminded that they're part of a huge fabric of the universe and not just this singular, isolated person.
No question about it.
But it's a synchronous experience until the mind makes meaning, has some intellectual sense of it, and grants it significance, which is that it gives it emotional valence in one's life. When that click happens, that's when it's a synchronicity. Why am I the person who saw this convergence? Why did this happen? And I'll do something with it.
Thank you.
Yeah, that psyche is active. Yeah.
Yeah, so in our Dow Science book, we shared that synchronicity and coincidence can come from the quantum entanglement, and actually quantum entanglement can explain the cause effect and also coincidence.
Well, you know, Pauli, every morning to interpret his dreams, he threw an I Ching hexagram, and he used the hexagram as a mantic tool from which to reflect on his dreams. So, and he had very significant dreams about Chinese women. So I wrote a paper on that too, Jung and the Chinese woman, who kept appearing in his dreams and actually mimicked the spin that he then came up with in terms of his theory of the fourth dimension, the electron spin. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, our final presentation is by Dwight Holbrook from Adam Mickiewicz University. Beginnings, the possibility of something from nothing.
Okay, well, I just want to thank you all for being here and for this opportunity for me to give my presentation. I want to apologize for the fact that I will be reading this, but on the other hand, it's such a basic, primitive topic that I might hopefully make up for the reading. So please bear with me. I'll try to do a little song and dance as I read it. But anyway, the topic is beginnings, the possibility of something from nothing. This presentation considers the notion of origins or beginnings as taken in a literal sense, namely as a something wholly originating out of the blue, out of a nothing at all, rather than the commonplace and plausible understanding of a beginning as something new and different, yet even so as arising and brought about by something else, not from a literal nothingness. To begin with, there are admittedly interpretations in science, particularly in quantum physics, that get tantalizingly close to the notion of a beginning of something from a literal nothing. One such example could be that paradox in quantum physics where the observed measurement of a quantum particle changes a quantum particle status from a probability to an actuality. One could also cite the case of quantum entanglement, non-locality, something instantaneous and unmediated across space and time, where, in short, what happens over here can instantly affect and be affected by what happens over there, millions of light years apart. But even so, the end result is not exactly an origin in the sense of a something from nothing, but more like an origin from something, even if the causal connection is unclear or by inference, be it by the act of observation or by a measurement producing the effect. Likewise, one can point out the unclear connection between a purportedly determined outcome as a something from a chaos scenario, as that term is used in physics. Nevertheless, there is still that something rather than a nothing before the determined outcome, namely that prior state of chaos. In contrast to these scenarios, what we are looking for in this discussion is a gap, like a hole in the clouds penetrating through from outside the expanding universe, i.e., the nothingness outside. In other words, the complete absence of the before, outside space, and the something that constitutes the whole inside, a something from nothing with no explanatory before, that kind of beginning. This takes us closer to closer scrutiny of the pivotal words in this query on beginnings, namely these two everyday words, something and nothing. Obvious as their meanings seem at first sight, the two words something and nothing are actually elusive as distinct designations. As Heidegger points out, each of the two words is co-referential, and in a sense, their meanings beg the question of meaning. For example, the sunlight is bright seems to be pointing to an objective fact, a something, but actually its meaning hinges on an understanding of the opposite state, the nothing of darkness, by which the sunlight can be compared. Likewise, the words something and nothing evince their meanings by way of contrast. In other words, what would nothing mean if there were not a something that existed by way of contrast? How I will proceed to address this semantic limitation of opposite referrals will be to point out that there is more in store of the meaning of nothing than mere implication by contrast with its implied opposite. The examples I will provide will aim to demonstrate this deeper level of nothing, a level from which beginnings can be said to truly take place in the raw, so to speak. Admittedly, there is much confusion about this kind of raw nothing, just as there is about other things, the meaning of which are seemingly beyond our capability to experience and are taken as abstractions or understood by inference, such elusive notions as infinity, the intergalactic void, or the notion of compact mass that can deform space-time to create a black hole. Take an everyday example, the number 0. In Poland, where I live, the number 0 is generally taken as a starting point in situations like describing the ground floor as 0. Not surprising, the floor above that is the first floor, not the second floor, just as the start of a new day after midnight is 001, not 1201. The latter suggesting the previous day is still there, lingering and dragging on, so to speak. Granted that so much about science and its calculated measurements is about the non-experiential After all, what does infinity mean in terms of experience? Still, there are provocative areas where an experiential perspective, guided by a literal and non-co-referential understanding of something from nothing, can challenge the territorial claims of science, at least it seems to me. Consciousness is a case in point. As David Chalmers has brought out, this something it is like of consciousness isn't easily explained in terms of cause or comparison or function or brain data. So is it something or more like a nothing? One may take it as a something in contrast to unconsciousness or death, but can we know this if we haven't died or when unconscious? I can only speak about either from a conscious perspective. And as for the latter, this consciousness is the better descriptive label something it is like or nothing it is like. While the concept of nothingness has been batted around for centuries, taken up by such luminaries as Meister Eckhart, Heidegger, Sartre, and Buddhist contemplatives, let's here limit ourselves to the paradigm of a something derived from a non-comparable and literal nothing, and furthermore to how such a notion impinges on certain presumptions of science. Based on the evidence of an expanding universe and other scientific data, a leading interpretation about the origin of universe is that it all began with the Big Bang and that time itself began with the Big Bang as well. This leaves open the possibility of a literal nothing before the something of the Big Bang. But what is this literal nothing from a scientific point of view? Some interpretations would attempt to avoid a pre-state of oblivion that would leave science with a blank about that nothing, a realm opaque to theory, data, evidence of any kind, replacing that with, for example, a postulated state of pre-origin analogous to a curved globe. Hence, no problem of beginning from nothing, nor of an end. It's just a curve. It doesn't start or end. Other interpretations might propose, instead of a literal nothingness before the Big Bang, the existence nonetheless of certain pre-temporal preconditions that would make the Big Bang at least partly explainable, on the assumption that pre-temporal preconditions is not a contradiction in terms. Or another alternative, namely that the Big Bang was neither the beginning of time nor the beginning of the universe, hence avoiding the paradox of a something from a literal nothing, despite the evidence of an expanding universe from a presumed starting point. And even the notion of the expanding universe, expanding, one might ask, into what? Shall we call it nothing that lies outside the expanding universe and then call it space-time once it is inside? If so, this would serve as a prime example, it would seem, in support of the something from nothing hypothesis argued in this presentation, the nothing being understood not by comparison to its semantic opposite, but as a literal nothing that resists such comparison. So let us move on to one final proposal of a something from nothing, and this one that evidences from our very humanity and ability to pursue science in an objective way. The objectivity that a scientist presumes to have in order to evaluate data correctly and support a theory is premised on what is traditionally known as the skeptical argument. If my decisions and judgments are preconditioned and predetermined by what has been fed into my brain, including all the influences from my past, then how is it I can stand apart from those influences and see things as they really are? Are judgments possible, or are they presuming what is in fact preordained, being predetermined by external forces? What is interesting about this perennial question, this question of free will, especially in our robotic age, is that the issue, in fact, precisely hinges on a nothing that has no scientific description as a something. Ultimately, it is about human experience, reproducible and consensual, that tells us we're free and unprogrammed as we confront each other, an experience that as well exposes an absence, the absence of a completely explained cause or predeterministic influence directing or clouding our judgments and choices. In other words, that nothingness, which in this case constitutes the absence of the explainable by which judgments, decisions, and choices are explained on an analytical basis. In other words, the key to that nothingness in this case lies in our human capability to be free of a predetermined past, and as a consequence, the failure of explanation to tell the whole story. Just how nebulous this nothingness of free will can seem to be is sampled in a recent newspaper article about a man in the subway who threw a total stranger, in this case a woman, in front of an oncoming train. Was it free will that made him choose to do it? This particular article was focused on cause, the man's past, the mental disorder, street life, leaving a gap on the question of presumed guilt, the man's responsibility, his decision to do what he did. Indeed, do we use the word guilt at all, or instead explain the crime as caused, which is so much more concrete, configurable, and specifiable than the nebulous assumptions of free will, a term for a kind of nothingness our humanity is assumed to possess, and by implication, much of our language as well. Words like guilt, responsibility, heroism, courage, cowardice, and even us just thanks and thanks. Thank you for going out of your way, presuming it wasn't necessary or wasn't inevitable. You didn't have to do it. Words and expressions that connote and suggest the nebulous terrain of freedom and free will. The focus in this paper, in this talk, has been on specimens of beginnings that can be said to arise out of a kind of nothingness that defies explainability in terms of a prior cause or a before and after sequential understanding of one thing leading to the next. We may also treat in reverse this subject of the beginnings of something out of nothing, for example, by considering an experience, parapsychological in nature, where the something of a landscape dissolves and loses traction with the world of things, and out of that change, a nothingness emerges that has no relation with what was before. James Conner gives his account of such an experience as follows. At last, I lost all thought of myself. I lost the sense of myself watching myself and was just there as the desert and the comet were there with the stars, the cold. Halfway through a single breath, the night revealed itself as joy. The joy did not rise up from me, nor was it in me. Or if it was in me, it was only because I was in the night. It was more than a feeling, it was an understanding, a knowledge beyond words. A knowledge beyond words, I would suggest, is another way of describing this literal nothingness, a nothing that emerges out of a something landscape, and yet a nothing that has no comparative relation to what it has emerged from. Thank you very much. My background, I have to confess, is not in mathematics or science, okay?
Questions, comments?
Yes. Hi.
Right up front.
Yeah, thank you for that profound. Yeah, I think it is very profound, and in fact, big part of the Tao science is about how everything is created from nothingness, emptiness.
Yeah.
And also for our human, for each one of us, our goal is to let go of the judgment, go back to that emptiness, and in that emptiness, actually, we have infinite potential, infinite energy and wisdom, everything. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Is it any? That's it. Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much.
That concludes our session. Thank you to all the speakers.